Alright traders, welcome back to the channel. Here we have a special request on the channel to look at weak highs and weak lows, right? So this is going to be all about looking at structural weak highs and structural weak lows, right? So what do we mean by this? So this is one of the most important things that's used to analyze the markets in any way, right? So this is going to be on weak structures, right? Weak versus strong structures. And what do I mean by this, right? So in the markets, every single structural high and structural low can be broken down into weak structures and strong structures. So what is the difference between a weak structure and a strong structure, right? So what we have over here is, let's quickly define them, right? So a weak structure does not break previous structure, right? So a weak structure does not break previous structure, right? And a strong structure does break previous structure. So if I spell that, so does break previous structure, right? So what do we mean by this, right? So it's actually quite a simple concept, but a lot of people tend to overlook it. People overlook it because it's one of the simpler concepts in trading, and yet it's so effective. And I feel that a lot of people overlook simple concepts which they shouldn't be looking over, right? And this can massively increase your trading as a whole. So if we look at weak structures and strong structures, let's start with a bullish scenario, right? So a bullish scenario produces highs and lows and highs and lows, right? Highs and lows and highs and lows, right? So let's analyze first the strong structures, because it's easier to analyze the strong structures, right? So what we have over here is we have higher lows, right? These are higher lows over here, right? Each low represents a higher low, right? So let's quickly label that in green, right? So these are higher lows in green over here. So let's label that. These are higher lows, right? And the key thing to understand here is that each one of these higher lows contributes to a new breaker structure, right? Every low that I'm highlighting in green represents a breaker structure to the upside, right? So this is what we see over here. So we see a structural break over here. We see a structural break over here. And we see a structural break over here, right? So when we see a strong structure, what we need to understand is that we've understood that it's broken the previous high, right? So again, let's quickly dissect this again in a little bit more detail, just so people can understand. I'm going to talk people through the diagram as well. So please take notes on this, right? So what we see is we see a high over here. This is an all-time high. We see a correction, right? Every market has a correction. Now, this is a higher low, and it's a strong low because it's breaking the previous high, right? And we see the same thing over here where price retraces. This is a higher low that then produces a higher high, right? So what makes a strong structure, right? What makes a strong structure in this case is that it's broken the previous low, right? So this here has broken the previous low. We see a break of structure to the upside. So the arrow represents a break of structure just over here. And this breaker structure itself signifies that it's a strong structure. So let's label that as a strong structure. Right, perfect. So let's quickly go down now. This is a strong structure. Now, the same thing applies in a bearish scenario, right? So when we see a bearish scenario, what we're looking for is we're looking for lows and higher lows and lower lows and higher lows and lower lows and higher lows and lows and higher lows and lower lows, right? Just like this. So again, what we have over here, if we label this now, each higher low, I'm now going to label in red. So this is a higher low. Let's change the color to red. So this is now a bearish scenario, right? So this is now a higher low. This is a higher low. This is also a higher low. And this is one more higher low, just like this, right? So now from here, we see breaks of structure to the downside, right? We see breaks of structure to the downside. This is a breaker structure. This is a breaker structure, and this is a breaker structure, right? So these are all structural breaks to the downside, right? So again, these now become strong structures over here. So each one of these in red is a strong structure. And the reason why it's a strong structure is because this high has led to a breaker structure. This high has led to a breaker structure. This high has led to a breaker structure. Now this high has led to a breaker structure. So now the natural question is, what makes a weak structure? So let's now look at what makes a weak structure. Well, let's quickly zoom in, right? So now if we see bearish structure over here, what we see is we see a leg down followed by a higher low, and now we've seen a break of structure. So this now again is a strong high. So what makes a weak structural high, right? How do we know if it's a weak structural high? Now, again, every market has a retracement, so we see a retracement, right? Now from here, what we see is we see a retracement down before price begins to head up. Now from here, what we need to understand is that this is a strong high as it broke the previous low. This is the previous low, right? So the previous low I'm going to label in green, just like we did before. So this is the previous low, right? This is now the previous structural low, and we've seen price break structure to the downside, right? Just like this. Now this gets broken. This is a strong structure, but you now want to ask yourself, what about this high over here, right? This is also high in the market. Is this a strong structure or a weak structure? Well, the answer is it's a weak structure. So if we zoom into price, sorry, not zoom into price, if we zoom into the schematic, what we're seeing over here is we're seeing this was the last low over here, right? It's very important that people understand. This is the last low, which I'm going to label in red, right? This is the last structural low. Now from here, this high has not produced a new low, right? Notice how the way I've drawn it, this did not make a new low, right? No new low. And therefore, it's a weak structure. This now becomes a weak structure, and therefore it's targeted. So in our analysis as traders, we look to target this particular high over here, right? So now if we take this to the market itself, right, we can begin to dissect, right? So what I've done is I have labeled the highs previously, as you can see. If we quickly use the bar replay, what we see over here, when price gets up here, right? So let's quickly look at this. Right, notice how this is the last structural high over here. This is a sweep of liquidity, right? The wick itself didn't break above, so this is now a weak structure, right? At the moment, as it stands, what we have is we have structure giving us a weak structure down here. So this is currently a weak structure. So let's label that in red, okay? Sorry, in green. This is now a weak structure. The reason why it's a weak structure is because it's failed to break the last high, which is up here. It's only wicked above, it hasn't broken above. And so this now becomes the overall target. Yes, this is hindsight, but this is essentially how the concept works, right? And I'm going to show you it in live price action. So now what we see is we see price break structure to the downside, right? So this break of structure to the downside tells us something. Yes, we've had a break of structure to the downside. Now, this structural high over here is deemed as strong. And the reason why this is a strong high, let's label it in red, is simply because it's broken the last low, which is down here. So now if we continue on in price, what we see over here is we see how price has again given us a retracement leg. So this is our pullback. And from here again, this high over here has failed to break the previous, this low, sorry, has failed to break the previous high. And so this is now a weak structure. So this is something we label in green again. This is a weak structural low, and from here again, of course, it becomes targeted, right? This is price action back in 2022 when we were bearish, okay? So again, we see a break of structure to the downside, and you understand the trend, right? So what we see over here is we see price giving a high up here, so this is a structural high. This low now becomes weak because this low from here hasn't actually broken the last high, which is all the way up here. This low is weak because it didn't break the last high. So people understand the general consensus, right? So if I keep playing price on, again, what we see over here is we see how price has come down to a low down here. So this is a strong structure. This is a strong structure simply because it's broken the last low down here. So this last low has been broken just like this. Okay, this is a break of structure to the downside. Excellent. Now we continue on. Again, this is our retracement leg. So this is now a retracement. This is a weak structural high as it's failed to produce a new high. This is a weak structural low, so I keep getting the highs and lows mixed up myself, right? But this is a structural low, and it's a weak structure as it's failed to break the strong structure, which was up here previously. Again, we see price break structure to the downside. So people understand the general gist of this, right? So if we go to the most recent euro dollar price action, right? Again, what do we have over here when we look at structure, right? So what we've seen over here is we saw price shift structure to the upside just over here. So this was in 2022 going into 2023. So again, what we have over here is we have price giving us, if we quickly go over this, so let's take the replay back. Again, from here, now we understand we're in bullish territory, right? So we understand that as it stands, if we continue to replay the bars, right, at this point over here, we understand that we have a structural high over here, and we have price giving a structural low, right? And this structural low has given rise to a structural high. So from here, as it stands, what's the strong structure and what's the weak structure? Well, this is a strong low. This is strong. Now, what's this? This is a weak structural high. And the reason this is weak is because it hasn't broken the previous strong structure. So this is weak. And weak structures are targeted structures. Now, I've asked this to my students before, and usually the top students get this right. Why is a weak structure a targeted structure? Well, it's simply because above every weak structure is a liquidity pool, right? So a weak structure is essentially a liquidity area that we look to target. So if we continue on price, we can see that eventually price did go on to break structure to the upside. Again, so we see price breaking structure to the upside. right? So we've seen a clear break of structure. Notice how every structural break is with a body. So we've seen a clear structural break. And now this gives rise to a structural high just over here. Now from here, we see a minor retracement, right? We see a retracement down into a fair value gap, classic ICT concepts using premium and discount. Now from here, again, you want to ask yourself, we have a strong low down here because this low broke the previous high. Now, what is this? A strong structure or a weak structure? Well, once again, it's a weak structure. And the reason why this is a weak structure is because it hasn't broken the last strong low, which is down here. So now the strong low is down here. Now, if we continue on price, again, what we see price breaking structure to the upside, right? So this is quite repetitive, but I want people to understand the overall concept, right? And this is something I get a lot. A lot of students ask me about this, and a lot of people get stuck on this concept, but really it's one of the most simple concepts if you understand price action, right? Look for strong structures, look for weak structures. Ask yourself out loud, what is price broken? Where are we heading towards? Which fair value gaps have been filled? Which PD arrays have been filled, right? So using weak and strong structures allows you to really build an accurate narrative. And it's one of the 4 pillars of structure: dealing ranges, PD arrays, and fair value gaps, right? Structure is one of your best friends in the market, right? So now if we look at most recent price action, what we have, this is Eurodollar live, right? So again, what we have is a dealing range, right? Consisting of this swing high down to this swing low. So again, what we have over here is we have a strong structure over here. So this was the last structural low down here. We saw a break of structure to the downside over here. So this was a break of structure to the downside. This is our dealing range, right? So let's quickly label the dealing range, right? So the dealing range is essentially this range over here. This is the dealing range, right? So you want to ask yourself, this is a strong structure, right? This actually broke the last low. So this is now a strong high. And by default, this now becomes a strong low, right? Because this low has not, as of now, broken the last strong high, right? So this is a basic overview as to how you can use structure in a more complex way to help build a narrative in the market. So if you like this video, give it a like and thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the next one.